Welcome to Tips for Transitioning Back to School for Families and Caregivers. During this presentation, we will discuss strategies and supports for preparing your child for learning in the school building, discuss strategies and supports for children that need extra support transitioning back into the school building, learn about social narratives, discuss the importance of communication with school teams and children, and provide some links to LCPS parent resources and videos. Why do we need a plan for transition? The typical transition from summer can be a stressful time for families in general as we go back to schedules and routines that may be more structured than our summer schedules. It can take a week or more for some children to get used to the flow of things again. With the extended break from school, it may take some children even longer to adjust. The effects of COVID-19 on each family will vary. COVID-19 has been traumatic for many people, children included. Some children may find it difficult to part from their family members for the school day, or may be worried about getting sick or getting their loved ones sick. Schools will look different during this time, and there will be new expectations as the district works to keep children and staff safe. There will be many safeguards in place that make the environment significantly different than when they left last spring. For instance, masks, social distancing, limited movement within the buildings, and limited or very structured interactions with others in the building. And the period of adjustment may be longer for some, especially if they are in hybrid classes or some of their siblings are staying home until the complete transition of all students back into LCPS buildings has occurred. You may have a child that requires no transition preparation other than the date to go back to school. However, you may have another child that is concerned about the return or requires additional supports to ensure the transition back to the school building is as seamless as possible. Additional supports may include talking about the school day or visiting the school prior to returning. It is important to consider the individual needs of the child and your family as a whole, to decide which supports will be most beneficial in preparation for transitioning back to school. Talk to your children to find out what their needs are and how you might be able to help them. There are a few different categories of supports that we may utilize for transition. Those categories are verbal, visual, and physical. Verbal supports would be those supports that expose your child to something by talking about it in order to prepare them for something, like a transition. Another word for this is priming. Visual supports would be those supports that expose your child to something by showing them visuals, objects, or places to prepare them for something, like a transition. And physical supports would be those supports that allow you to practice routines in order to prepare for a transition. Categorizing supports may be useful when considering the needs of your child. If you have a very visual child or a child that learns well through seeing, you might lean towards the use of visual supports. Many of these supports can be used together, alone, or in some combination. We will first discuss verbal supports. Verbal supports involve a conversation of some type. Remember to have these conversations during a neutral time. A good time might be during a meal time. Everyone involved should be in a calm state with minimal distractions. For example, choosing a time that's not during TV time or not when the child is engaged in an activity that they are very focused on. Discuss their feelings and thoughts. Actively listen to their concerns and validate their feelings. Topics may include how they are feeling about their return and what they like about school, classmates, or teacher. What do they miss about face-to-face, and what are they excited about in their return? When they talk about how they feel, be sure to validate their feelings, even if you do not feel the same way. For example, if your child tells you that they don't want to go to school because they aren't in the same class as a best friend, ask them how it makes them feel. You can express that you understand how they might feel that way. If they are up for it, tell them about a time when you felt that way and what you did about it. Try to remain positive and talk about the possibility of something like new friends, or ask them what is something that they can do to help make the situation better. You can visit our multi-tiered Systems of Supports webpage on the LCPS website to find more resources on social emotional support. Discuss expectations or changes in expectations and the environment. Topics should include new expectations such as mask wearing, more frequent hand washing, social distancing, temperature checks. And there are likely to be changes within the school buildings, which may vary by school. Lunch, recess, specials, and other activities will look different. Focus on the positives. While there are a lot of unknowns and frequent changes or interruptions to our daily lives, our behavior as adults and the language we use regarding those things is picked up by our children. While we should also acknowledge and validate our own feelings, we should try to model using positive language and actions when talking about school. This will help many children feel more positive about returning. Remind them of how proud you are of them for returning to school and for any other step they're making towards preparing for school. Next, we will discuss visual supports. Utilize visuals while having a discussion to explain or enhance important points. After the initial introduction of the visual, you can show it as often as needed. Once a child is familiar with the visual, you won't need to talk in detail about it each time you present it. You can simply show them the visual. Explain the purpose of the visual when your child is in a calm state. If the visual is in regards to a transition, show them prior to beginning the transition. Next, we will look over a few of the different types of visual supports that you may see as your child returns to school. Examples of visuals include a daily countdown calendar to count down the number of days until school starts. You can also make written or other visual representations of expectations by writing them down on a piece of paper and posting them in your home. You can ask the teacher for school-wide or classroom expectations and begin reviewing them. Or you can write down the daily routine on a daily or weekly schedule or calendar. Your child can also make visuals or learn to write their routine on a calendar. Reinforce this behavior by doing it with them, reviewing it with them, or making positive statements about their behavior of being responsible. There may be visuals about mask wearing or social distancing posted around the schools. Showing your child these in advance of explaining it to them will help reinforce what they will be learning in school. Remember that your school or teacher may have different images specific to their school or classroom. These mask wearing and hand washing images can be found in some of our schools as well. Again, practicing these behaviors at home as well as talking about them in advance will help prepare our children for returning to the school buildings. Check out your school's website for the PBIS expectations specific to your child's school. This will help prepare your child for the expectations of the school prior to their return. Social narratives are another type of visual support that can be very useful for all types of learners in all age groups. They are both a verbal and a visual tool. During this next section, we will discuss the following points. What is a social narrative? How can it help? How do I write one? How do I implement it? And where do I get one? Social narratives are simple stories that visually represent social situations and appropriate social behaviors. The social narrative connects the important details of a setting or social situation to support the learner in understanding the social context and in developing a new social skill. While most individuals generally understand social norms and conventions, some learners may need explicit instructions to understand these norms. Some key points about social narratives is that they are individualized and short. They explain social situations, expectations, or appropriate social behaviors. During COVID-19, a social situation might be interacting with friends, and the expectation or appropriate social behavior is to remain 6 feet apart with masks on properly. Social narratives explain feelings and perspectives of the individuals or others. Using the same example above of COVID-19, the individual may feel sad that they can't see their friends' faces, but the feeling or perspective of the others, their friends, is that they feel safe when you stay 6 feet away and wear your mask. You will want to include all of these points in the story, but you can add or remove details based on the child the story is written for. You want to explain the important aspects without overwhelming the child with too many words or expectations in one story. These are examples that can be found on the internet with a quick search on social narratives. Some stories are mostly pictures with a few guiding words for the reader, while others are mostly words with an image or two for personalizations. There are one-page social narratives and some that are made like short books. The coronavirus example is a book with several pages. It is comprised of a large picture with 1 to 2 sentences on each page. Create a story that hits the important points and isn't so long that your child loses interest or is overwhelmed. You also want to make sure that you are motivated to read it to them. If it takes more than 5 minutes of your time, you might be less likely to review it with them. Over a fairly short amount of time with daily review, you'll find that your child has memorized the story. At that point, you can remind them of certain images in the story or certain phrases that will help them remember the expectation. Now that we've had a brief overview of social narratives, let's talk about how they can help. Social narratives help pre-teach social situations. Ideally, you would introduce it prior to the situation to best prepare the child. However, we can't always predict how someone might respond in a new situation. Therefore, creating a social narrative as soon as we see a need is important. Social narratives provide expectations up front, which minimizes confusion for the child and the parent. Everyone is made aware of the expectation. Social narratives may help validate or ease the child's feelings. They teach strategies by including what the child should do when faced with a situation. And everyone is on the same page. It is important when teaching skills and expected behavior that everyone knows the expectations and the outcomes. All adults in the home should be familiar with the social narrative to minimize confusion. Now we will go into greater detail on how to write a social narrative. We already know that the story needs to be brief and individualized. On a piece of paper or in a word processor, Write down some notes using these points as a guide. Describe the situation or event and place your child in the event. Describe the effects the situation or event has on your child or others. Describe how the situation or event should be best handled. And always remember to end on a positive note.
We are going to discuss writing a social narrative using this example narrative, I will wear a mask. When creating a social narrative, make sure you describe the social situation, behavior, or event, and place the child in the event. For example, I am going back to school. When I'm at my school, I will wear a mask. In this story, we're discussing mask wearing in the school, and I represents the child or the reader. We use simplified language, short sentences, and an image to enhance the story. Next, you want to be sure to describe the effects the situation or event has on your child or others. For example, wearing a mask can help prevent the spread of germs. Define the target behavior or skill so that it is observable or something you can see. As in, my mask needs to cover my nose and my mouth. As you see here, an image can also be included so that the learner has a visual of the expected behavior. Continuing on, we are still describing the effects the situation has on the child and others. This keeps my germs in and other germs out. It's important to include or explain the feelings and perspectives of the individual or others. My mask may feel a little silly or funny on my face at first. That is okay. I will get used to it. Here, the writer made sure to acknowledge the feelings of the reader. This page reinforces or restates the expected behavior of the child and others. I will wear my mask so I can stay healthy. My teacher and classmates wear masks too. Be sure to reaffirm the child engaging in the expected behavior. State how other people will feel when the student engages in the expected behavior. For example, my teacher will be happy that I am following the rules and staying safe. My classmates will be happy that I'm helping them stay safe. If you wanted to make the story a little longer, you could also include a page that tells how people will feel, or the perspective of others, if the child does not engage in the expected behavior. That page would happen early in the story. You want to finish the story with mention of the expected behavior and the positive feelings and perspectives people will have if the child engages in the expected behavior. If access to specific reinforcers will be included, that information can be inserted on this page or on an additional page. Finally, always end the story on a positive note. Restate the expected behavior once more and the positive emotions and feelings of others. The others could be a group of people or specific people. It's especially useful to use a specific person if the child has a preferred person or to make the story more personal. For example, the story could read, Miss Maisie, the teacher, will be really happy if I wear my mask. To conclude the story, wearing a mask will help keep everyone happy, healthy, and safe. I will wear my mask.
Now that we've seen a completed story and have an idea of what it can look like, let's break down the steps a bit further. All of these steps don't need to be followed in order, but we should make sure to include them when we are writing the story. First, if it is a behavior you plan to address in the story, be sure to identify which behavior or behaviors you are targeting. What is it that you want the child to do? For example, in this story, we are targeting the behavior of wearing a mask. If it is a social situation, what is the social situation? What setting does it happen in, and who are the people involved? An example of a social situation might be how to respond when others aren't wearing their masks properly in school. Next, define the target behavior or skill so that it is observable or something you can see. It is important to write what the behavior looks like so that there isn't confusion as to what the child should do. It also communicates to all of the adults involved what the behavior should look like. In this example, the writer described what mask wearing looks like and included a picture to demonstrate what proper mask wearing looks like. Be sure to write the story so that the child is aware that the story involves them or is about them. Use pronouns like I, me, my, or their name in the story. It helps provide a sense of ownership over the story and their behavior. In this story about mask wearing, the writer wrote, "My teacher will be happy that I am following the rules and staying safe." Choose the appropriate length of the story according to your child's ability and attention span. In the example shown here, there is a story with a lot of symbols to match up with the words. The reader may point to the images instead of the words when reading the story. This type of story may be more appropriate for a learner that is limited vocally verbally. There are about 5 lines of text in this story. However, in the second example, there are a couple of images, but mostly text, and some longer sentences. Children that are able to read and use more complex vocabulary may benefit from something written in this manner. You also want to make it age appropriate. If you have a high school age child that is able to read, stories with minimal or no images may be more appropriate. Stories may also be written in a one-page format or a booklet format. Consider if your story will be visually overwhelming to the child if everything is on one page. Would they benefit from having 1 to 2 sentences on a page, like we saw in the coronavirus story? Do they like storybooks? In these cases, a booklet might be more beneficial. Do you want them to be able to have it as a one-pager that they can stick it in a notebook and reference quickly and discreetly when in class? Can your child digest a lot of information in small chunks? And can your child read the story independently? If that's the case, then they may benefit from a single-page story. Again, remember to consider the needs and ability of your child. Next, enhance the story using pictures, photos, computer-generated icons, text, or hand-drawn pictures based on the child's age and understanding. We discussed this a little in the previous slide. Adding images of any type can make the story more interesting and memorable. Children tend to choose books that have pictures. I remember initially being disappointed as an adult when the pictures suddenly disappeared from my books. It meant I had to read all of those words and use my imagination to come up with my own pictures. And yes, I still enjoy an occasional picture in my books. Include icons that may be used at home or in the classroom as reminders. If I intend on using the hand raise icon in the lower right-hand corner of this slide, I will include it in my story so that the student will know what it means when I point to that icon or gesture to it. Include images of the behavior being performed correctly. Images that show the emotions of others. Images of the location or social situation. And images of a reinforcer if one will be delivered for engaging in the expected behavior. For example, if the child earns a token for engaging in the expected behavior, write that into the story. Including images of your child can make it more personal. For early learners, including an image of their favorite character or item, like a race car, can help engage them. Decorating the cover page of the story with those images may get them interested in what you're reading. Now that you've written the best social narrative of your life, let's talk about implementing it. The first step is to read the story to your child. Make reading the story a part of your daily routine. For example, reading it before your child leaves the house for school. Read it with your child, at least initially. Older children or independent readers may want to read it themselves. Be sure that they are reading it if you are not reading it to them. Ask them to read it aloud. Answer questions and talk about it if they're interested. Read prior to the upcoming event. If your child will be returning to school, start reading your story in the days leading up to school starting. Some children may need a longer exposure to the story to grasp the concepts. And read the story as often as needed. You may only need to read it once a day, or several times a day, depending on the target behavior or situation and your child's needs. Next, model the behavior. Children model our behavior all the time, whether we plan for it or not. If social distancing and mask wearing will be new to your child, practice what social distancing and mask wearing will look like. Practice standing 6 feet apart, which is much farther apart than many people actually stand when they're social distancing. Practice wearing a mask while talking to each other. If they see you doing it, it may ease their worries about these new behaviors. The behavior will begin to feel normal with modeling and practice. And the most important part of implementation is reinforcement. Reinforcement will depend on your child. A reassuring smile will be enough for some children, while others may need contrived reinforcers like tokens that they can exchange for a preferred item or access to something like technology. You should decide on the reinforcement when you are writing the story prior to implementation. Provide reinforcement as soon as your child has engaged in the expected behavior. If the story you wrote is for the behavior within the school day, you can ask your child's teacher for feedback and then provide reinforcement when they get home. If you are collaborating with the school team, you can ask if they can provide reinforcement for the behavior if it is performed during the school day. And even if the behavior is reinforced at school, be sure to acknowledge the behavior when the child returns home. If you want additional information on reinforcement, please see the links included at the end of this presentation. Now you may ask, how do I get one of these social narratives? As we discussed previously, you can create your own. This is especially important and helpful for those behaviors that have to do with home, or increase the likelihood or the chances of success for your child during the school day. For example, you may consider writing a story about getting on the bus in the morning. You can also ask your child's teacher or school team to collaborate in the development of a social narrative. Some teachers may have written the story for another student or for your child within the classroom that they can modify or that you can get an idea from. You can ask what behaviors need work or what reinforcers are working at school. The last type of support is physical supports. Pairing fun activities with the school grounds and with preferred people may be a way to ease anxiety and refusal. It's okay to not use the word school in the beginning if your child flinches at the word school. For example, you might say, "We're going to play at the playground," "We're going to go have a picnic," or "We're going to just take a walk around the track." Over time, you can walk around the building and perhaps arrange a time to walk through the building. It's important to do a variety of activities and walk around the premises. Be sure to not only visit the playground each time you go. Otherwise, your child may start to think that when they go to school, it's just to play on the playground and then to return home. Discuss expectations during your visit. Those expectations might include walking on the sidewalk, waiting for temperature checks before entering the building, where to stand if social distancing, and practicing mask wearing. Practice daily routines. While some children may have been getting up to start class at 8 a.m., it's a much faster transition to go from bed to school in the next room of your house. Some children will need to get up earlier to wait for the bus or to begin the walk to school. Getting up earlier might also mean that they need to get to bed a little earlier. Consider if your daily routine will shift once your child is back in the school building, and begin practicing for that a week or so in advance. Some additional ideas for preparing for a school return include asking the teacher if there are any virtual field trip videos that can be shared, or plan a virtual play date with classmates. Read books about going to school. Plan a run-through day a week before school starts to get the kinks out of your routine and give them a glimpse of the return to school. Begin nighttime routines and morning routines at least 1 week before school starts. And practice mask wearing, hand washing frequently, and social distancing. Sometimes we need to think outside the box a little. What might make your child feel excited about school? What are things that they enjoyed about school when they attended last year? You might begin to look at the school website or social media together. Look at teachers' pictures and other photos to give your child a sense of the fun learning that happens at their school. Make connections to your child's school community. You can draw or research school mascots. Look for school spirit colors around the house. And explore the PBIS tab on your school's website. Encourage your child to write letters or draw pictures to post around the house, or send in the mail to family to tell them about going back to school. At a time where people are looking to make and maintain connections, writing letters to friends and family can be a therapeutic tool for the writer and the receiver. Some children may exhibit significant anxiety or behavioral challenges during the transition back and may need additional supports, and that's okay. On a very important note, if you feel that you need more resources or guidance, please reach out to your teacher or case manager. Please reach out if you have any concerns. School teams are ready to support you through this transition. You can email your child's teacher or case manager or meet with them during their office hours. During your meeting, discuss specifics regarding your concerns for your child's transition back to school so that they are able to provide you with the resources that you may need to have a successful transition. On this page, you will find several resources on social narratives and the link to the LCPS's MTSS website, where you will find social emotional learning materials and PBIS materials. You can find additional supports on the PRS website, which is linked here. This concludes our presentation, and we thank you so much for joining us.